All right, I'm here with Josh Stumpenhorst. Josh was the 2012 Illinois Teacher of the Year. Josh teaches social studies, language arts at Lincoln Junior High up in Naperville. Josh, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us.
No problem.
One of the things that I wanted to do and you're aware that I wanted to get you on here and talk to teachers about the benefits of using Twitter and how that's benefited you as an educator. But first, I want to follow up on something regarding regarding something I heard you say in an IEA interview. One of the things that you talked about was using your blog to quote cause conversations to happen regarding different things in education and keeping that conversation going. I want to follow up with a couple of questions because I think those are great thoughts. Number one, what are some things that you would say keep teachers from learning from one another?
I think probably the biggest problem that I think prohibits teachers from learning from each other is, two things really. One is time. They don't have enough time to collaborate with each other, and that's just due to the schedules and the nature of the beast. We all teach different periods. If you're lucky to have a common plan period, that works, but that's not typical. Myself, I have two kids at home. I get out of here as quick as I can to take my sons to their baseball games, and so there's not a lot of time. And then I think the other one is culture, and that's culture within a building. I have been in buildings where the culture is outstanding. The culture of sharing and learning from each other is it's there. You can feel it. And I've also seen places where it's not the case. If you go and ask for help, that's an assumption you don't know what you're doing, and that it's kind of a negative connotation of that. So I think we just don't have enough time, and there's a culture of if we're asking for help, we don't know what we're doing, and that's it's a shame. And, I know way too many teachers that sit in their rooms with their doors closed for 30 some years and never talk to another teacher about what's going on in their rooms, and that's kind of sad. It really is, because there's fantastic people in all of our buildings, everywhere, and we have to learn from them.
Sure. So I guess to follow up with that, what are some proactive things, whether you guys do that in your building or you've seen it done in other places and I'll tell you that culture does exist at Centralia Junior High School. We are a school that teachers are constantly trying to learn from each other, learn from other teachers outside of this school, outside of this district. But I just want to kind of provide our staff with what are some other ways that we can kind of keep that conversation going, so that we can continually improve our craft of teaching.
One initial way, and we started this in our building a couple of years ago, where we would go and watch each other teach with no agenda, no expectations of I'm going to come in and watch you teach and criticize what you're doing, but to have those conversations. And it's pretty remarkable when myself as a history and English teacher steps into an art room, and sees what's going on in there. That's totally out of my element. And you learn a lot from that. You learn about how kids interact in different areas, and you learn about that kid that doesn't ever say two words in your class is an amazing artist, and that's where they flourish. And there's a lot of insight that you can be gained just by watching other people teach. And I think you have to start with having those conversations. I think we talk about what you're doing. I'm a team leader, and every Monday at our team meetings, we talk about something new we're learning. Yes, I've kind of forced my teammates to do that, but it's worked out well because we're sharing what we're learning. And if you find yourself in a place where you really don't know what's going on, or you don't feel like you have the resources in your building or at your grade level or your team, then you have to get online. And that's not the creepy online. I'm talking about using Twitter and blog, the professional learning communities that are already there. Because even if you have a great school, what I have found, I have great colleagues, but eventually it becomes an echo chamber. You start hearing the same things. If they're your friends, they're telling you you're doing awesome, and that's great. But sometimes you need that outside perspective. And I was being, told everything I was doing was great for so long that I just assumed that. And then I started looking outside and opening myself to other perspectives, and I started getting some critical feedback, which made me better. And I did that online because those people are, in most situations, they're not in my building, they're not in my school. A lot of them are not even in the country. And so that outside perspective is so crucial because it's not something you're going to get in your building. And especially if you're in a building where teachers have been there a long time, you get stagnant, and it does become that echo chamber, like I said, where people are constantly saying, "Oh, that's good," or "That's bad," but that's just the way that teacher is, so we're just going to accept it and move on and hope that they get to retirement soon. But that's not the way to go about doing it.
Sure, sure. That's good stuff, and that kind of answers one, the next question. I know that as I was watching that interview, one of the assistant principal in your building said that you're always exploring new opportunities, and this is crucial both for yourself and for your students. And to me, that speaks of a continual desire to improve and to continue to get better. And you kind of just spoke to where that desire comes from. And so practically, you challenge yourself to improve by Twitter's been a main one of the big ways that that's happened for you. Is that correct?
Yeah, Twitter, Twitter initially started out kind of that way, and really where I find the most growth for me professionally is actually through my blog and through the blogs that I read and the comments that I make. Because my blog, although at times I do write some political nonsense on there, upset with, Arnie Duncan or whoever, but, I think we all have our opinions, but I share what I'm doing in my classroom. And I do get feedback on that, and I get comments on that, and that's where I find some of the biggest growth for me because, again, it's that additional perspective. And Twitter is great because once you start using it and you give it the time, you start developing relationships with people and having conversations with people you would normally, never have a conversation with. To give a quick example of just how it's impacted even my students is I was in Philadelphia in the spring, and I was at the ASCD conference, and I don't know if you're familiar with Reed Timmer. He's on the Discovery Channel's Storm Chasers, and he gave a keynote, and it was fantastic, and I connected with him on Twitter. And long story short, I have these kids in my class that are just obsessed with meteorology. And I had sent a tweet to Reed a couple of weeks ago, and sure enough, next Monday I'm having a meeting with some of the execs within Discovery Education to get Reed to come to my school and talk to my kids. And that kind of stuff wouldn't be possible
Sure.
if I just talked to the people in my classroom. And so, there are so many opportunities that are there that would not normally be there. And, I have great people I work with, but they're limited in their reach, and Twitter is literally unlimited, as well as the blogs.
Sure. So I guess the last question I would have for you, and I appreciate you saying that because about 3 years ago I had created a Twitter account for myself and had just
Hmm.
kind of let it sit because I didn't really know what to do with it. I know nobody really cares what I ate for lunch. I don't really care what anybody else had for lunch. It doesn't,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. I just thought, what good is this? And then one of in the last district that I was at, our assistant superintendent said, "Hey, have you considered using Twitter for professional development?" And this was last spring. And so I got on there and I started seeing, following different people in education and seeing, that, here's a link to a page of how to connect our Common Core to whatever, and just tons of things
Yeah.
that I've been able to learn. And so I think I hear you saying the same thing, that there are endless opportunities out there for us to be able to connect. One of the things that we've done is we've got a Google spreadsheet by content area of people to follow in Twitter. So so our teachers can have access to that. But the last question I wanted to hit you with was the last school year, we had a grant, and our 7th and 8th graders all received iPads. And so, we're really in the, second year, still kind of the initial stages. Our teachers are constantly using them as we go into the classrooms every day. They're using them and they're making great use for them. So I guess the last question I would say is, how can we as a school effectively use this technology to not just say, hey, it's cool, we've got iPads, that's great, but how can we actually improve and enhance the instruction that we're offering to our students?
Oh, I think there's a couple ways you go about doing that. And the first way, and I've seen this unfortunately in far too many places, that when you have a large purchase, whether it's smartboards or iPads or laptops, the trap teachers sometimes fall into is they take the tool and they build their learning around the tool, which is wrong. Just because you have a hammer doesn't mean you have to go nail in a bunch of nails if you don't need to nail any nails. And so having the iPads are great, but what are you doing with it? What are the kids creating? If it's just a nice thing to have on their desk to use Wikipedia on, then you're not using its full power. And so one of the things that I would suggest is to get online and get on Twitter and connect with people that have used it. I know there's some just fantastic people out there that are using those. I'm not one of them. I don't have a lot of iPads in my building. We just started a BYOD pilot this year that I do have some students bringing them in, but I'm learning, and so I find myself reaching out to people like Kyle Pace, and there's people online on Twitter that are, technology specialists or teachers who have been using these devices, and so that's the place I would go, because again, you want to know somebody that's using it in a classroom and get real classroom teachers telling you how they're using it. You can read about it in a book, but if you can talk to somebody who's actually doing it, they're so much more powerful that way. And again, because you don't want to just say, well, we have iPads. Well, so what? How is learning better for your kids today than it was yesterday when you didn't have them? And if it's just because they have an iPad in their hand, well, then that's not the answer. And unfortunately, I see a lot of people that have devices, and iPad's a great example. Well, they're making flashcards on the iPad. Well, how is that any different or any better or any more efficient or any, helping learning any more than them doing it on a set of note cards they can bring home? Because a lot of iPads, I don't know if your guys stay at school, and so we have these things where just because we made it on an iPad, it's better. Well, it's still a worksheet. If it's on the iPad, it doesn't make it necessarily better.
Sure.
I guess that's where you have to look at in that question of, okay, what is better? How is the learning better for that kid because he has that device? And if you can't come up with an answer, then you're probably just using it for the sake of using it, and then you've just spent a lot of money.
Absolutely. Okay, well, I tell you what, Josh, that is very helpful stuff. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with
Nope.
me. Learned a great deal. I'm hoping I know my staff will benefit from this as well. So I appreciate it, and I hope you have a great year.
All right, thanks. I
So,
appreciate it.
thanks, Josh.